Welcome. How many days have you guys been back for? Is this first day? First day. First day back into uncertainty. Well, hopefully this will be the easiest part of your day. It will be a nice relaxing conversation about how to maybe live your life differently. So I am here to tell you about how a conversation can lead to change. My name is Ben Cooley, and for me, conversations have made a lot of things happen in my life. But I want to take you to a time where it was 7,119 days ago. It's a big number. Or, let's break it down in a different way. 19 years, 5 months, and 26 days to the day that it was spring baseball my sophomore year. Now, in that moment, this was a pivotal moment in my life. The year was 2001. Not sure where you're all in 2001, but for me, 2001 was sophomore year of baseball. And for me, a story got written in my life where I no longer could see my life in a different way. So many times we see things and then stories happen, and then we put in walls in our life. And the crazy part about these walls is all we need to do is walk through them, but we never actually do. I want to set the stage. It's the American country baseball field. We're playing the local high school next door. You've practiced all week. You've put in that work. You've done the routine. You've ran the bases. You've done the sprints. You're ready to play. That moment comes up where the coach reads the roster. And he says, first base, second base, third base, shortstop, left, center, right. And you wait for your name, and it never gets called. That year, we played 98 innings for 14 games. Out of those 98 innings, I played 2. In that year, a belief that ran on autopilot for almost 15 years was put in place. That belief was something very simple. The belief was that everybody else gets to play in life. Everybody else gets to sit on the field and play on the field and have everything they want in life. They do the work, they get to be out there and have fun. But this guy stays on the bench. The story that I told myself was I was a bench warmer, and that was as much as I was going to be. That I wasn't going to be a someone. That I wasn't going to be someone people looked up to. Because everybody else gets to have what they want. But me, I'm always going to be on the bench. And there's so many similar stories like this that play out in our life. Because ladies and gentlemen, I bet all of you in this room have a story just similar to mine. Maybe it's baseball, maybe it's sports. Probably a lot of them happened in the years you were in high school. So many of our adolescent memories are implanted, and how we can see our life are shaped in these 4 years in this building. The moment that you realize you can start to change it, that's when things can happen. I will be 36 next month, on the 20th. But for me, my life really started changing when I was 30. So if you can imagine going from high school to 30, running with this program. Because when I turned 30, my biggest fear in life was I was going to die alone. Because I was so isolated, I no longer had an ability to connect with other people. My biggest fear was reaching the end of my life and having not a single person care that I existed. That my imprint on this earth come and went and nobody noticed. And at 30, that was my biggest fear. I remember having a 2-year-old daughter at the time, looking down at her asking, what kind of father am I going to be? What kind of husband am I going to be to my wife? Because inside, I felt empty. And because of that, I just felt hollow. And I didn't know how to fix it. It was almost a paralyzing week for me. And to make matters worse, if this midlife crisis wasn't enough, at the same time I dropped out of the College of Engineering. And if you've never dropped out of college, 1 minute you have a path, this is how your life looks, and then you step over here without college, and the path is gone. Then what? What do? My grass dried up. Everybody tells us the grass is greener on the other side. Get that degree. Life will get better. You'll get that job. But when they don't prepare you for it, is when you have to drop out. What do? I floated for probably 6 months before I truly fell into my groove. But it wasn't just like that. An important friend came into my life, and we had a conversation, and he gave me a question that forever changed how I look through my life. I want you to think of questions going forward as the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask about it. That often we feel so stuck that many of you in this room have felt stuck in the last 6 months. Not sure what to do, not sure where to go. But it's a question. A single question in hypothesis in science class can revolutionize how the world sees science. Because you create a hypothesis, you do results, you do testing, you prove it. We already know academically why a question can do big things. What we don't know is how that question can affect our life. So for me, that question is simple. If you want a result in your life that you've never had, you need to do something that you've never done. So this is a two-part question. You first have to figure out, what is it something you've never had? And when I looked inward on this, I saw friendships. At the core of that, I didn't have any real friends in my life. I didn't have anybody outside of work. All of it was empty. So then I had to look, okay, I got friends. Now this, you guys, are probably hard to believe that friends was this big idea that came out of this question. But for me, that was what I was craving the most, connection. So I've got this question. I know friends is what I'm needing. Now you have to figure out, well, you've done this life. I've gone to work, I've started a family, I'm doing all the things that the American dream says you're supposed to have. But yet I don't have this result. What could I be doing wrong? And now this is where it gets kind of crazy, because the simple answer is the right answer. You need to talk to people. And so when I went back and figured out, well, why are you afraid to talk to people? The answer was simple. Within these walls, in my high school career, one of the scariest things most men do is we ask a girl out. Isn't that kind of the most dangerous thing we do in high school? And you walk up to a girl and you ask her out and say, hey, you want to go out with me? It sounds like a simple conversation. But if she says no, and that happened to me, a belief gets cemented in your head that that rejection is something you need to avoid, because that feeling is horrible. You never want to feel rejected. So subconsciously, you learn to prevent that. And so much of my life was rolled on every person I would talk to was that high school girl that was going to say no. Okay, so let's refresh. We know friendships is what I need. We know that I need to talk to people, and that every person is not the high school girl that's going to say no. And I'm not going to die by saying hello, even though that's how my brain was looking at it. So then I had to okay, where am I going to meet people? We see people on airplanes, airports, grocery stores. All of those sound too risky of an environment. Who talks to the person next to my airplane? I mean, come on. That's not something most normal people do. But for me, there was a place that I was routinely visiting where I wanted to say hello, but didn't have the guts. And now it's going to be even more crazy where this story goes. But for me, it was dads at the park. There was always dads at the park. Those dads always playing with their kids. And I wanted to say hello, but I always said in my head, they just probably want to play with their kids too. They don't want to have a conversation. You probably had a long day just like I did. All this BS that prevented me from saying hello. One day, I reached a point, and I'm like, you know what? This is over. I need to do it. I said hello, and the craziest thing happened. He said hello back. It's crazy. A simple hello was all I needed to walk through. But man, was that paralyzing in the beginning. What you don't realize, what I didn't realize, is that he was wanting to talk to me just as much as I wanted to talk to him. We were both just playing chicken. And what you don't also realize is that people like having conversations. They're just waiting for others to go first. And my favorite question to talk to a dad at the park, the one that slid right under the radar, even if he didn't didn't know it was coming. He answered the question before you even knew it hit him. How old are your kids? That was my favorite question to ask because they'd always answer. And you'd always get a nice foundation to talk from. You'd start sharing stories, you'd start comparison who's got it worse, especially if your kids are older. You'd start getting all these horror stories that is raising kids. I have 3 of my own now. But that moment, man, that moment changed everything. Because I realized in that moment that I could have conversations. Now, why is that important? Why is friendships this big idea that no one talks about? This big idea is super important because what most people, and what I didn't know at the time, people didn't tell me, is that friends are mirrors to the value that you can't see in your life. How many times have you had a friend in your life come into your life and reflect something back in a way that you couldn't see? Our mind is incapable of seeing our own potential in so many ways. Because in our mind, it's doom and gloom, especially during the pandemic. Think of how much doom and gloom our mind has been going through. Okay, we've got friendships, we're talking to people, but still, why are these friendships so big? What I've learned to come to think of friendships, and the reason why no one talks about it is I'm not sure, but everybody needs to be talking about it because they've changed my life. So I want you to take a picture of an ocean in your head and mentally put an armada of ships. But these aren't just any ships. These are friendships. I know it's kind of corny, but hold with me here. If you have an armada of friendships on your ocean of life, the ocean is your life, the waves are what life gives you. Imagine if each ship dropped an opportunity, an idea, a conversation, a platoon of people maybe to save you. Maybe you're in need of rescue. Those opportunities float ashore. And so this is where I've learned something that the amount of opportunity you have in your life is directly proportional to the amount of ships around your ocean. Or the amount of people that you talk to daily that are new. So, we've got these ideas. We've got this idea of friendship. Now what? Well, there's a couple things we don't really know. We don't know that for millennia, we survived in communities. That in the last 100 years, we decided to do life alone. That we thought we could self-isolate and everything would be okay. I think we've all seen the consequences of self-isolation, mental health. It's not how men and women were wired. It's not how we lived for centuries. Because there's an important aspect that you don't realize from a community. There is always someone ahead of you, and there's always someone behind you. There is a guarantee that life will give you more than you can carry on your shoulders. You might be walking around like this, but inside, you're walking around like this. Because, let's face it, the load of what life has given you as teachers to deal with in the next few months is really heavy. And we were never designed to carry that load alone. So what you don't also realize about friendships is they help you share the load. When you ask a friend to carry the load with you, to share something on your heart, it's not just letting your burden down, you're also helping them. Because they're probably going through something too, but you don't know it. And so, remember, share the load. Because, like I said, we were never designed to do life alone. Next, I want to tell you a story. I read this book, The Heart-Led Leader, A Journey of 13 Inches from Your Head to Your Heart. Sounds creative, it's only 13 inches. And the book walks you through a story, each inch, on traveling from your head thinking to your heart thinking. Now, this is a name you don't know probably, Frank Delangelis. But you do know where he's from. He was the principal at Columbine High in 1999, where 12 students and one teacher lost their life. But what you don't know is the story afterwards. Afterwards, he committed to get every child through that system. Every kid that was in pre-K in 1999, all the way up, he got them through. In 2012, he completed that, and May 2014, he retired. He was known as the teacher's principal. Everyone called him Mr. D. He knew that to get through together, to get through the year, we needed to be together. He had a mentality of no child left behind, not just academically, but emotionally. And that's what I think all of us have the opportunity to be. That conversation to a friend that someone needs, that friend that just keeps us going. Each time we interact with someone, whether it be a teacher to a teacher or a teacher to a student, you have the opportunity to represent what he called a one Columbine culture, that no one was left behind, and to get to the end of the year, we're only going to get there and finish strong if we do it together. But the crazy part through all that is you've got to have a conversation, you've got to say hello, and you've got to be a friend. That was so powerful when I first read this. I remember driving to work hearing this story and being moved through tears because it just hit me that hard. Because that's exactly what the world needs more of. It needs more people like Frank. We're going to self-isolate coming up. Kids have been isolating for 6 months. Those kids are going to need someone to show them an example. When we think of isolation, these years in high school are so important. There was a study conducted in 2017, and they concluded that an adolescent at the age of 15 that had 3 or 4 close friends, deep relationships, was more emotionally stable at the age of 25 than their peers. It concluded that the one that was sought after, the popular one, had more social anxiety when they were 25. The research says friendships matter. Again, nobody's talking about it. Friendships can move mountains for someone. So much of what people need these days isn't some big solution. You just need a friend. Because you've probably all had that moment where a friend comes in and helps. There's a mentality that I want you to keep in the back of your head through this. And it's fairly simple, and it's another pretty corny message, but it works. Be a barrel of monkeys. A barrel of monkeys is connected. A barrel of monkeys has one hand up because you yourself need help, and there's someone higher than you on the chain that has already done what you've done. No one teacher has the collective wisdom of a lifetime of teaching. Always be asking for help. Have that friend of network to be able to lean on. But then also, there's always someone behind you. There's always someone behind you that needs a hand. Don't climb the mountain and forget to look behind you. And the barrel of monkeys is that mentality that you want to have. Because the barrel of monkeys is connected. It's how you can connect and go through life. A flashlight is a powerful tool. It sheds light in darkness, it can illuminate things, and what most people don't talk about, and I didn't talk about, was for me, those stories of baseball, girls not having friends, they were all in my darkness. And when they're in your darkness, they can do crazy things in your head. The cool thing about a friend is they're the flashlight. They can actually illuminate that shadow, bring light to it. And the crazy thing happens is when you bring something from the darkness into the light, it loses power. Now, 5 years ago, when I figured out not having friends, I did not imagine I would be on stage 5 years later telling you a story about it. But I've brought that story into light so many times, it doesn't have any power over me anymore. And as we go through this year, remember this. There is a moment in your life that you wished you had a friend. There's a moment that maybe a friend was there. Maybe the death of a loved one. Maybe a struggle at school. And a person came into your life and you're like, wow, where have you been all my life? I want you to remember, be the friend you wish you had in that moment. Because that's going to be the thing that changes everything. Because when you can be a friend to someone, you can move a mountain for them. Now, let's go through some basic how-tos. Because now maybe I've inspired you to think about friendships in a different way. But I'll be honest, there is still a lot of legwork in friendships. But the first one you always need to remember is the power of hello is one of the most powerful tools that you can teach a child or a teenager. Because I wish someone would have came into my life 15 years ago. I had a lot of good teachers back in the day that were mirrors for me. My chemistry teacher gave me the advice, "You're a big mind thinker, Ben." Before that, I felt like I was odd. She was the mirror, the value that I was able to grow throughout my life. The power of hello is so powerful because every problem that you guys are facing coming up in the next 6 months, the collective wisdom of you teachers can solve that. What you're facing, what you're struggling through right now, that struggle isn't the only one. Whatever your mind says that you're the only one feeling this way and everybody else has just figured out unicorns and rainbows, that is not how people have figured it out. So, remember the power of hello can open up so many doors, but you have to say it. You have to say hello. You are always one conversation away from something amazing. And guess what, guys? You're going to miss 100% of those shots you don't take. I can tell you that I am almost addicted to talking to strangers, and it's almost as a result of the detriment. My wife hates it because everywhere we go, I'm always striking up a conversation because she just wants to enjoy wherever we're doing. Maybe it's a restaurant. Airplanes. I've had some of the most amazing conversations with random people I sat next to. I've had some amazing conversations in the grocery store. Every conversation you have, every person you walk by could be that one person that changes your life forever. I am here today because people came into my life and opened up a world that I never saw possible. That is the power of hello. And it can happen anywhere, from the airplanes to airports to grocery stores to here. So many new kids are coming into the building. Some kids have been here, some kids have moved in, some are freshmen. Each one of those kids is an opportunity to expand your world, then also to expand theirs. To teach this idea of friendship is the one vehicle that can keep a child going, a teenager going, because if you feel connected to the world, you can really start to do things. But it's when you feel like you have no opportunity, you feel like the world is closing in, that's when the darkness closes in, and that's where you no longer can even, maybe in some cases, see yourself living. Here's an important point. I work with military dads, and military dads have a lot of baggage. And I imagine we all have some form of baggage that we carry around, because there's stories and things that have happened in our life that we feel scared to share. And this is why it might not work, because if you don't share who you are, if you don't reveal your own beauty, you're not going to be able to create friends. People are going to feel like you're fake. What I didn't realize when I was in high school is everybody makes you try to feel like you need to fit in. What I learned now is every time I fit in, a little bit of me was lost. Instead of becoming more of me, I became what everybody else wanted, and I had to refine myself in its entirety. So when you think of why it can't work, think of what you're holding on to your heart. And if you've ever seen Brene Brown's Vulnerability on Netflix, amazing recommendation. Because in it, vulnerability is something that's mostly not talked about in mainstream, really anything. But there's some powers and vulnerabilities that a few dads have taught me that when you reveal something in your life, just like I did about my story, I went first. I have not exploded. I am still here, I'm still breathing, despite my mask driving me nuts. But what you realize is I'm going first, and every time you go first, you give someone else permission to go second. There are stories in your life. Maybe me telling my story has identified a story in your life about being in high school. Maybe that story is something you lead with to demonstrate vulnerability. To demonstrate being what I learned from reading that book is being a heart-centered leader. that people and relationships are the heart of the matter. So remember, when there's things that you feel like you're just going to shake and vibrate out of your bones when you're getting ready to talk to someone, step through that. Because whatever your mind is telling you is going to happen, the exact opposite will happen. You will become magnetic when you become vulnerable. People will come closer, but our mind tells us that people are going to go farther away. Next question. So I started at the edge of the park. I had my little flying radar in there. How old are your kids? But there are so many other conversations that, like, where do you begin? Because many times it's, for guys, it's sports, it's work, and you just cycle through these layer one type conversations. And they're not bad, but they don't really make you feel connected. They're just kind of humoring and taking up time maybe. When you think of what to say, I want you to just live in the moment and be curious. Don't be curious about yourself. Be curious about them. People love talking about themselves. The best way to be a friend is honestly just let someone be themselves to you. Ask a question that makes them talk more about themselves. Ask like, well, why did you go to school? Podcast interviews, I'm always trying to find a thread to pull when they're like, well, why did you do all these different things? Why did you join the military and become a ranger? Because that sounds pretty intense. And what you also learn is there's a lot of early events that people led up to in that moment. So when you think about what to say, lead with curiosity. I like to say that I'm kind of drunk on curiosity. So whenever my brain wants to, like, oh, I should learn about that, that's what I do. People have probably heard, find your passion, find your purpose. All of those things are good. But a lot of people have never actually been asked the question, what's your passion? What's your purpose? I remember the first time it happened to me, I was like, that's a curse question because now I can't stop thinking about it. Thanks. Why'd you ask me that? But I remember getting this insight that completely changed how I think about passion and purpose. And that is, don't focus on your passion. Don't focus on your purpose. Focus on your curiosity. Curiosity is the breadcrumbs to your purpose. Always follow your curiosity. It will expand the view for you to be able to see your passion and purpose. Same thing when you're in a conversation. Lead with your curiosity, and you'll be able to see worlds that you never knew. I've seen worlds of stay-at-home dads. I've seen worlds as freelance entrepreneurs. I've seen worlds where a guy is actually a wellness retreat specialist, and he creates retreats that are around meditation for his lifestyle. I never would have had that information or even known it existed without a conversation. And I said hello, and I learned so much from it. So remember, power of hello, lead with vulnerability and your curiosity, and just let it happen. And finally, remember this. When you think of everything that's going on right now, students are going to come into these doors next week, and there's going to be a lot on their mind. They've self-isolated for 6 months. And within that world, they're going to be probably just retreating because that's what they've been doing for the last 6 months at home. You have the opportunity to set an example among yourselves and among your peers and the students of what that looks like coming in to not isolate, to work on friendships. Think of the freshmen coming in, the social pressure to try to figure out things before. I mean, now, you can't even see people's facial expressions, whether they like you or not. Someone could be making a face behind your mask and don't even know it. Like, these are all things that are going to go through a freshman's mind. And we need to be able to be there. So remember, often people get so hung up on trying to change the world. Something a lot of people like, oh, I'm going to go out and change the world. Well, what you don't realize is one person that you influence can change the world. And then again, and again, and again. And as teachers, you already know this. Each student that goes to your classroom is a student that can potentially change the world. So don't try to change the world all at once. Just try to change how that one student sees the world. Because guys, I'm telling you, friendships conversations, and hellos is one of the core fundamentals that I learned 15 years after high school that would have expedited how I saw the world, how I saw myself fitting into it, and what I thought my gifts and abilities could do. But if you just follow the academic path, very little of that exposes who you are. You need friends to be the mirror. You need people to have conversations with, to feel connected. And that is how you start to change the world for one person. Thank you. You guys get to enjoy it. Anybody have any questions? We have time? No one's going to be brave enough to say hello and ask a question?
Well, hello.
Is anybody excited to go out and say hello to the next person they meet that they haven't got the chance to know yet? You got a question or are you excited?
I'm excited.
Good. Because I'm telling you, not many people are talking about friendships. The research is out there. If you type friendships in adolescents and teenagers, massive amounts of Google studies will come up and tell you how core friendships are in the development, emotionally, of a teenager. And if you think of what Mr. D did for those kids at Columbine afterwards, no kid was left behind. Everybody was remembered for his legacy of making sure that everybody felt connected. And that no time in the future that was ever going to happen again, where a student self-isolated to the point that he felt like he only had one choice of action. Thank you for everyone for coming in and hearing, hopefully, how friendships can change your life.